Besem Ab, Werwald, Wemefeskadus, Ahadawamla, Amen. Besem Ab, Werwald, Wemefeskadus, Ahadawamla, Amen. Besem Ab, Werwald, Wemefeskadus, Ahadawamla, Amen. Yes, good morning, and hope you've had a good weekend. This is the week of the Deborah observance within the Great Lent Fast. The Deborah is the Mount of Olives, and it's the area where Jesus Christos gave many sermons and preached before his crucifixion in contemplation, but also after, just before his ascension. So Deborah is a period where we're observing the teachings of Jesus Christos in that point in his life and in his ministry. But today's reading is Deuteronomy 24. Give thanks, blessings and love. When a man takes a wife and marries her, then it shall be, if she finds no favour in his eyes, because he has found some unseeming thing in her, then he shall write her a certificate of divorce and put it in her hand and send her out of his house. When she has departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. If the latter husband hates her and writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter husband dies, who took her to be his wife, her former husband who sent her away may not take her again to be his wife after she is defiled, for that would be an abomination to Yahweh. You may not cause the land to sin, which Yahweh your God gives you for an inheritance. When a man takes a new wife, he shall not go out in the army, neither shall he be assigned any business. He shall be free at home 1 year, and shall share his wife whom he has taken. No man shall take the mill or the upper millstone as a pledge, for he takes the life in pledge. If a man is found stealing any of his brothers or the children of Israel, as he deals with him as a slave or sells him, then that thief shall die. So you shall remove the evil from among you. Be careful in the plague of leprosy that you observe diligently and do according to all the Levitical priests teach you. As I commanded them, so you shall observe to do it. Remember what Yahweh your God did to Miriam by the way as you came out of Egypt. When you lend your neighbor any kind of loan, you shall not go into his house to get his pledge. You shall stand outside, and the man to whom you lend your pledge shall bring the pledge outside to you. If he is a poor man, you shall not sleep with his pledge. You shall surely restore it to him, the pledge, when the sun goes down, that he may sleep in his garment and bless you. It shall be righteousness to you before Yahweh your God. You shall not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your brothers or one of the foreigners who is in your land within your gates. In his day you shall give him his wages, neither shall the sun go down on it, for he is poor and sets his heart on it, lest he cry against you to Yahweh, and it be a sin to you. The fathers shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. You shall not deprive the foreigner, or the fatherless of justice, nor take the widow's clothing in pledge, but you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and Yahweh your God redeemed you there. Therefore I command you to do this thing. When you reap your harvest in your field, and have forgotten a sheath in the field, you shall not go again to get it. It shall be for the foreigner, for the fatherless, and for the widow, that Yahweh your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive tree, you shall not go over the bores again. It shall be for the foreigner, for the fatherless, and for the widow. When you harvest your vineyard, you shall not glean it after yourselves. It shall be for the foreigner, for the fatherless, and for the widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore I command you to do this thing. For these few words give thanks, blessings, and love. So you might have noticed as I was reading that I was pausing at certain points. And that's because it kind of changes topic. So rather than mashing it all together, and I've had to read this a few times to be honest this morning, because there's a lot packed in here, because it's trying to give instruction about the moral framework and behavior for the Hebrew people. And it's got different kind of clauses every 2 or 3 verses. Sometimes they're just 1 verse long. So I felt reading it just needed a bit of spacing out. So hopefully you kind of related to that. So I have made some notes because they're too much for me to remember in one go. The first deals with divorce, and we've seen this already, where it tries to present a framework or an understanding for women in what is essentially already an unequal society. So it is an unequal society for women, but it is trying to provide some protections in there, even within that framework, which is, it's a challenging nuance, but it's a nuance nevertheless. So it does talk about divorce, and essentially what this first law is talking about is that divorce should not be entered into lightly. If you divorce and the woman then takes another husband, if that new husband dies, or if that relationship ends in divorce again, then the original partnership can't then also get remarried, because actually the fact that they married in the first place means that divorce shouldn't be entered into lightly. So if they ever thought that they were ever going to get back together again later down the line, then that's causing them to think, actually, maybe we shouldn't get divorced in the first place. So it's trying to show the importance of marriage. It's allowing divorce, and they have the understanding that divorce is a reality. But it does say that once divorced, that original couple can't be brought back again into marriage. You will have noticed, I'm sure, the agency is very much on the man divorcing the woman if he sees something that he doesn't like in her. It doesn't talk about it in the other kind of direction. But the opportunity, if a marriage breaks down, then there can be divorce. And the fact that it does allow for the woman to remarry does show a certain level of agency for the woman to rebuild her life after a divorce, and it doesn't mean that she has to remain single for all her days. So as I said, it's a challenging nuance that it's trying to create some element of agency for women in an unequal society. So that's not to be excused. It's just how it's laid out. The next element in here is about newlyweds, and it talks about when a man is newly married into a marriage, then for the first year he's not eligible to join the army, also to have to go away on any business, that he has to remain with his wife in the household, and for that marriage to have the chance for that strong bond to be established, and also obviously for the marriage to become fruitful and bear any children, and to consummate the marriage in that time. So it is trying to have a very strong union at the beginning of a marriage, that then going back to the divorce, then hopefully any divorces won't happen, because it's based on solid, strong framework from the very beginning. So that's the second suggestion, moral framework within this chapter. The third one is about fair lending practices, and it's what lenders, if you lend someone something, or if they're even indebted to you for money, then you can't take away from that person something which is really integral to that person's household. So you can't take away a millstone. So you have to take away something which is commensurate and equal to what they owe you, rather than something, fundamental. In modern day context, if someone owes you, even £100 or $100, you're not going to take away their car or their house. It's got to be something which is commensurate on an equal level, but also on an equal level of importance as well. So that is the third pledge. So the fourth pledge is about slavery and the ban on kidnapping other Hebrews to become slaves within your household. And if you did that, then you yourself are committing a serious crime that's punishable by death. So it's the embargo on Hebrews enslaving other Hebrews. The fifth pledge within this area is about leprosy and the importance to treat leprosy as a serious condition, and it must be treated diligently, as it says. And then it reminds the listener about, remember what Yahweh your God did to Miriam, by the way, as you came out of Egypt. And if you remember, Miriam was Moses' sister, and together with Aaron, they started to complain against Moses, and saying, is it only you, Moses, that Yahweh speaks to? And Yahweh spoke very strongly against this insurrection against Moses, and as the instigator, he inflicted Miriam with leprosy as a punishment for her rising up against Moses, her brother. And then Moses had to plead with Yahweh to say, please don't do this. And Miriam then eventually was cured of her leprosy. So it's acknowledging that leprosy is a very serious condition and has to not be treated lightly. The next element is justice for workers and the vulnerable. And it says that when you are hiring any people to work with you, then they must be paid by the end of that day, and the sun should not go down on the end of that day. And particularly then, if that person is poor, the worker's poor, then the sun should not go down on you paying them, because they're relying on your wages to even provide clothing and shelter and food for themselves. So it says if you do that and treat your workers fairly, then that will be a blessing in the eyes of Yahweh, and that's seen as a role of righteousness for you, that you'll be blessed. So vulnerability, not exploiting those that are vulnerable, and being conscious of those that are vulnerable, that are within your camp or within your household, within your workers, and treating them with love, dignity and honor. Individual responsibility is the next element, where it talks about parents should not be punished for their children, and also children should not be punished for their parents. So everyone has to be treated on an individual basis and according to their own individual behaviors, and we're not beholden to each other. Parents are not beholden to their children in that respect, and vice versa. And then the final element is about protection for the foreigners, for the fatherless, and for the widows, and those are people that are vulnerable within the community. So as we've seen before, farmers must leave crops behind for the poor and for the foreigners. You should not overreap your harvest from the olive tree and etc. You should leave some aside. And this really is about social justice and what we now call charity for others that are in less fortunate positions than ourselves. And it says, remember, you were a slave in Egypt and you were cared for. So now it's important that you care for others as I cared for you. So if you see anyone that's vulnerable, that is important you do your due duty, which is going to be blessed in the eyes of Yahweh, to help them and support them. So a much more gentle chapter today. So as I say, I'll have to read it a few times myself just to get the breakdown, but I hope it resonated and communicated. So have a blessed day. Whatever happens today, I pray that it's a positive one, and God willing, I'll be back more tomorrow for Deuteronomy 25. Give thanks.